With this, I would like to kick us off by introducing Martha Shimkin, Director of the Chesapeake Bay Program Office at the US EPA. Martha?
Thank you. It is my honor and my pleasure to introduce this session on the Chesapeake Bay, charting the course for Beyond 2025. We stand at this powerful moment, underpinned by science and bolstered by partnership, as the Chesapeake Bay program looks to the future and determines a continued and strong path forward to restore, protect, and conserve the Chesapeake Bay in its watershed across 64,000 square miles spanning 6 states and Washington, D.C., home to 18 million people and host to millions of visitors every year, the largest estuary in the United States and among the most important in the world. For this session, we will start with an overview of the Chesapeake Bay program, continue with an introduction of the momentous planning effort underway, and follow with a panel of experts and longtime leaders in the Chesapeake Partnership. With that, I'll turn it over to Herrick Hughes, a life scientist specializing in agriculture in our Chesapeake Bay Program Office, who is the coordinator for this session. Herrick?
Thank you so much, Martha. Good afternoon, everyone. As Martha said, my name is Herrick Hughes. I'm a scientist here in the Chesapeake Bay Program Office, and I'm going to give you a very brief introduction to the Bay Program to prime us for hearing about Beyond 2025. But before I get started, I just want to say that the Chesapeake Bay Program Partnership is not something that can be comprehensively described in just a few minutes or with a few slides. There is so much great work that's being done by the partnership and so many wonderful folks doing this work. I encourage everybody to visit chesapeakebay.net, our website, to learn more, and we will have that site included on the final slide of this presentation. But with that, what is the Chesapeake Bay Program? So the Chesapeake Bay Program is a regional partnership that guides the restoration and the protection of the Chesapeake Bay, which, as Martha said, is the largest estuary in the United States. And when I say that it's a partnership, I mean that involved in the program's work are approximately, and these are approximate numbers, but approximately 40 agencies and programs from the states within the Bay watershed and the District of Columbia, 19 federal agencies, around 1,800 local governments represented through the program's Local Government Advisory Committee, more than 20 academic institutions through the Scientific and Technical Advisory Committee, and more than 60 non-governmental groups. So here's just a visual of some of our partners. These are our signatory representatives. So EPA, which manages the program, they're on the right. Our jurisdictional partners up top, the Chesapeake Bay Commission on the left, and then our federal partners on the bottom. But it is very important to keep in mind that we also have partners at the local government level, as well as non-governmental and academic partners. So if our program is anything, it certainly is not small. But how did we get here? So the story of our program starts in the 1970s when Senator Charles or Mac Mathias of Maryland took a 5-day and 450-mile tour of the Chesapeake Bay after hearing complaints that things weren't quite right in the estuary. And I think it's important to keep in mind that the first Earth Day was held or was observed in 1970, and EPA was established in 1970. So this was certainly a time that was characterized by environmental consciousness. But Senator Mathias sponsored a 5-year study to analyze the rapid loss of aquatic life in the Bay. And that study showed that it was excess nitrogen and phosphorus, and these are nutrients, that were causing the problems. So with this in mind, the governors of Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, as well as the mayor of District of Columbia, the administrator of the EPA, and the chair of the Chesapeake Bay Commission all came together to sign the first Chesapeake Bay Agreement, which was just a simple 1-page pledge. But that set off a series of events that led us to where we are today. And first and foremost, it established the Chesapeake Executive Council, which was charged with overseeing the implementation of plans to protect and improve water quality and living resources of the Bay. And what was established in 1983 really evolved significantly over time. And there have been several other agreements over the last 4 decades that have shaped the form as well as the function of the program. So The first major adjustment came in 1987 with the 87 Bay Agreement. And that notably established for the first time numeric goals for pollution reduction and bay restoration. And then Chesapeake 2000 outlined a strategy for restoration through 2010. But before 2010, President Obama signed an executive order to renew the restoration effort in 2009. And then 5 years after that executive order, the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement was signed, with watershed being emphasized there because it outlined a more comprehensive partnership incorporating signatory members from throughout the watershed. And it also outlined 10 goals and 31 outcomes for bay restoration, which I will touch on now. This is significant because we are guided by these goals and these outcomes today. And really important to note here, because this will inform our discussion later, these are time-bound outcomes. Approximately a third of them have a deadline of 2025. We need to achieve them by that year, and particularly for the water quality goals. Just a couple of other points. So this made the headwaters states signatory members, full membership for the first time, and overall it increased the scientific rigor, the accountability of the program, and outlined a strong adaptive management framework through which we make our decisions. So very, very important. And now I have this here to highlight our 10 goals. These are our priorities. Everything from ensuring the sustainability of fisheries to mitigating toxic contaminants. This is really what guides our work. So I'll just give you a second to look through these. It is very important to note that the Bay program has celebrated a great deal of success. So, we've seen a general decline in the nutrient pollution in the major tributaries to the Bay, despite many headwinds. So in particular, we're faced with rapid development. We're faced with climate change. So there's a lot that is working against us, but we're still seeing progress. And we've seen just a couple of high level successes that we wanted to highlight here. 2 million acres of land protected and oysters restored to 10 of the Bay's tributaries. And while it's important to highlight our successes, we also need to acknowledge that we are not going to achieve all of our desired time-bound outcomes. So 17 are on track, and you can see those in green here. 12 are off track, those are in yellow, and 2 are inconclusive. And knowing that we're not going to meet all of our outcomes by 2025, we're not just going to wait for that date, right? We are looking ahead to the future, and we're asking, what comes next? What will the future of bay restoration, bay protection look like? And we're answering those questions through the effort that we're calling Beyond 2025. And here to tell you more about Beyond 2025 is Anna Killius, along with a handful of panelists from the Beyond 2025 Steering Committee, which is leading this effort. And Anna, along with Martha, co-chairs the Steering Committee, and she is the Executive Director of the Chesapeake Bay Commission. And it has been absolutely wonderful having her at the helm throughout this process so far. But thank you, everyone. With that, I'm going to turn it to you, Anna, and you can just let me know when you would like me to advance your slides.
Fantastic. Thanks, Eric. So as Eric said, I'm going to give an overview of where we are in the discussion of what comes next for the Chesapeake Bay Partnership. Before I begin, I should say the Chesapeake Bay Commission, the short version of who we are, if you aren't familiar with us, we are a tri-state legislative body. We are the legislative voice within the partnership, a signatory of the agreement, and we work on issues of common cause or common concern when it comes to the Chesapeake Bay and our tributaries in the General Assemblies of Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. So most of my members are state legislators within those General Assemblies. So in the lead up to 2025, when at least a third of our outcomes, the time-bound targets that we have come due, I think it was clear, because we track our progress, that we were not on track for some of those outcomes, and we needed to understand what this meant for the future of the partnership. Next slide. So with that in mind, the Executive Council, the leadership of our partnership, the top leaders, charged their staff with recommending a critical path forward for the partnership. You'll see kind of the operative part of that charge here, but it's basically divided into two pieces. One of those is to look at the lead up to 2025. So we aren't taking our foot off the gas in the meantime, but then also to look beyond 2025 at what comes next, and to really pay attention to what are those next steps for meeting our goals and outcomes. Next slide. So before we get to beyond, a little bit about the approach to 2025. A report was created, developed by the partnership with fantastic leadership from the communications team and NOAA to put that together with the input of tons of the stakeholders and partners that Herrick covered before. It assesses all of the 31 outcomes within the agreement. It looks at the challenges that we faced in trying to meet those outcomes and those goals, the lessons learned over the last 10 years under the current agreement, and then suggestions for progress moving forward. Some of the high-level recommendations from that report, if you don't want to read all of them, really is to focus on fast-tracking progress on the existing plans that we already have in place to guide our actions through 2025. So keep working on those. They are doing good work. Accelerate investments within those plans, and where we know the money can be used best, the resources can go farthest, and then integrate the latest science and monitoring that we have over the course of those 2 years to make sure that we're optimizing as much as possible. If you want to read the full report, you can scan that QR code at the top and page through it. Next slide. So that was up to 2025. Now we are trying to chart a course beyond 2025. So a steering committee has been established that is looking at what should that path forward look like. We kind of knew we couldn't do it within just 1 year, so we broke it into two pieces. The first piece, step one, is kind of scoping a plan of action. So what should we take on in order to chart the course forward? So that steering committee has been formed from partners throughout the program. We are reviewing some high-profile cross-cutting topics that kind of have bubbled up to the top based on some reports and some evaluations that we have on hand. And then we have a program evaluation that is being worked on by an independent evaluator that we will be looking at as well to inform that scope of work that we're identifying for the Executive Council. Step two will be implementing that scope of work, which will take place once we turn this plan over to the Executive Council and hear from them what they'd like us to do with it. Next slide. So as part of this Beyond 2025 path charting, these are the big questions that we have identified for ourselves in helping to figure out what that path should be. So where we are, what have we accomplished as a partnership under our current theory of change? What have we been able to do? And to answer that question, we have a number of excellent program reports and evaluations that have come to us from across the program, from outside stakeholders and scientists that are all able to kind of reflect on where we are at the moment. Where do we want to be? I think we all accept that the Chesapeake Bay has changed, the watershed has changed, and what does that mean for our vision and where we want to go as a partnership, and what do we want to accomplish? What we do, this is the goals and outcomes, the work that we have outlined for ourselves. What's our approach to meeting the goals and outcomes that we have? What is our approach to monitoring and modeling to figure out what our strategy should be and how we are going to measure our progress over time? How we work, this is our governance, the way that we meet each other in the room, the way that we organize ourselves and make decisions. So is that kind of putting us in our best posture for progress? And then based on all those questions, what's the path forward to accelerating progress and optimizing our work? Next. As I mentioned, we started looking at some high-profile cross-cutting topics to kind of start to find those ideas and proposals on what to do in the future. Those topics are clean water, climate change, healthy watersheds, people, and shallow water habitats. Within each of those topics, we asked folks to look at three things: vision, value, and vanguard. So vision, what do we want to hand the next generation when it comes to this topic? Value, what has worked and what needs to be improved when it comes to that topic? And vanguard, what is a transformational idea that could really change the level and degree of progress that we make when it comes to that topic? So all of those groups that were charged with those topics came back to us with some proposals that the steering committee has been able to read through and think about and try to synthesize together to figure out what that path forward looks like. In addition to those proposals from those groups and those topics, we also have that independent evaluation that is being conducted by ERG, mostly focused on the efficacy of our partnership and our structure. Next. So the next steps for the steering committee, we are taking all of that information that we received from the small groups on those topics, from ERG with that evaluation, and we are drafting a report that we will deliver to the management board and the principal staff, the different layers of our partnership for their review and decision making on what that path forward should look like. Once we have that draft, we will put it out for public outreach and engagement. We want to hear feedback from folks on what they think about that draft. We will have it'll be a 60-day comment period, and we'll take in those comments, and we'll have about a month to edit our product before it kind of travels up through the layers of our partnership. And then our executive council, the highest levels of our partnership, meets in December this year. And hopefully they will give us excellent direction on implementation and what comes next so that we can execute the plan that we've put forward. Next. So this is where we turn it over to our panel of experts and have a discussion on their thoughts on the path forward and what we've discussed so far. Next slide, I think. We have three excellent panelists. We have Charles Herrick, who is adjunct faculty with New York University, but he's also the chair of the Chesapeake Bay Program Stakeholders Advisory Committee. We have Larry Sanford, a professor and vice president for education at the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, or UMCES. He is the chair of the Bay Program's Scientific and Technical Advisory Committee. And we have Jill Whitcomb, director of the Bureau of Watershed Restoration and Non-Point Source Management with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. She is the Pennsylvania representative for the Bay Program's Management Board and also a member of the steering committee. Larry and Charles, also excellent voices within the steering committee and the conversation about the path forward for the partnership. So I'm excited to hear from them. I'm going to present to you three discussion questions and kind of direct each of them to one of you first to kind of lead off. But if you want to add on to my very brief introduction, please feel free to do so when I turn the mic over. So the first question, key takeaways from this planning stage. So what are some of the critical considerations that have been identified for the Bay program moving forward as part of this Beyond 2025 discussion? And if I can turn this question over to Jill first, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you, Anna, and really appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone today. I want to kind of reflect back on the Executive Council charge, specifically as it relates to restoration. In that charge, it says to develop and begin to implement a communication strategy that identifies key partnership successes, associated ecosystem improvements, and areas where more effort is needed. Second, provide snapshots of outcome attainability under the agreement, which outcomes are likely to be met by the date set by the partnership, which won't and why, and options for communicating these snapshots to demonstrate progress in achieving our outcomes and the remaining work to be done, including gaps to be addressed. So I framed my kind of response to this question under the auspices of that particular piece in the EC charge. And so as a representative on the management board, the Beyond 2025 Steering Committee, and co-chair to the Conowingo Watershed Implementation Plan Steering Committee as well. I think that there are some three key high-level considerations. Number one, think outside the box. We know, what was done historically does not mean that it's the best, or perhaps maybe the most effective solution for the future. Processes inherent to the Chesapeake Bay program should be reevaluated. What works, what doesn't work, why not, how can we make it all better, and what is standing in our way? What actions need to be taken in order to break down those barriers to success? We should be focusing on the results, not necessarily the means to get there. So what are we aiming for? For example, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment pollution reduction is a means to the end. The result, or what we're aiming for, is clean water for people and for living resources. And how do we get to where we want to go? Empowering people to make decisions that serve them and their community has yielded dividends in Pennsylvania, and asking what's in it for them, engaging communities and industry proactively, allowing them to lead the conversation has netted success and demonstrated improvements across all jurisdictions in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, which hopefully, will ultimately lead to improved waters in the Chesapeake Bay itself. Number two, play in the sandbox. I think a lot of us have been familiarized with the sandboxing approach, at least as it relates to the comprehensive evaluation of system response, or CSER report. We see that locally led decision making has helped enable changes in programs and policies at the state and federal level. These pilot programs or sandboxes to test drive new programs and adjustments to existing programs has really added value. And using that sandbox analogy, people learn best from each other when they work and when they play together. The partnerships within and those that extend far beyond the Chesapeake Bay program encourage collaboration and idea sharing. We should be leveraging lessons learned and sharing case studies in our local communities and jurisdictions regarding how these pilot and sandboxing efforts have worked and will continue to work moving forward. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. There's not one place that I can think of that only has one entity that can take full credit for any kind of success of a project. And so partners that have trust, honest and transparent communication with each other build strong networks and strategies for success. Finally, some alliteration for folks: communicate, collaborate, coordinate, consolidate, connect, and champion. There is no such thing as too much communication. However, how and what we communicate is really important. What are we trying to share? Who's the audience? Why is it important? What's the value that the information will bring? And recall that the Executive Council charge focuses on communication with regard to restoration. And that's a critical piece to the overall strategy moving forward. Collaboration, can't say enough how important collaborative partnerships are. Positive working and trusting relationships are the key to success in any endeavor. Coordination of people, tools, and data are essential to ensuring future sustainability of the program. It's easy to develop tools and to reach out to people, but if they're not coordinated and pulled together in a meaningful way, it's not going to be yielding the anticipated outcomes. Consolidation. Complex processes and structures do not allow for meaningful engagement with our community members and our stakeholders. This also ties into how we work. Complicated systems slow things down when we really need to be accelerating. Connecting. Really enjoy playing Connect the Dots and Connect 4 as a kid. Connecting the dots between clean water, people, living resources, climate, economic development, etc., is critical as we move forward. We need to help people, whether it's the general public, elected officials, or public, private, and non-governmental agencies, to understand those connections between their actions, the outputs, and the outcomes and results. And finally, last but not least, champions. Leadership comes in many different forms. People taking an active role in their local communities to champion their efforts leads to a groundswell of success. Champion could be a farmer who serves as a mentor to their neighbors, a resident of a community who participates in a watershed organization, township manager working with conservation districts and other municipal officials to implement projects. We need these champions to lead efforts across the watershed and at all levels and share the success stories that will help to motivate others to join in. So thank you.
Thanks, Jill. And before I go to the next question, just Charles or Larry, or Chuck or Larry, if you have anything you wanted to tack on, we have a minute or two.
Yeah, I have a thought I'd like to add, and that's just to reinforce Jill's statement that we need to think outside the box. You know, these programs, these large bureaucratic programs that are aiming for really big objectives, it's really hard to change course. But you know, when you get an opportunity like this, you really and that's what we're doing in Beyond 2025. You really need to take stock and think about, you know, what could we be doing differently? Should we be changing directions or staying the course? I think this is our chance, 2025 is, to really decide whether we want to try some different directions. And we shouldn't be limited by the inertia of the program itself.
That might be an excellent segue, but Charles, not to cut you off.
Just briefly. I really like Jill's emphasis on the power of casework and successes at the local level. And a consideration that has our membership, the Stakeholders Advisory Committee membership, excited and looking forward to moving forward through the Beyond 2025 process is, and this was an observation in the ERG evaluation, that the program's structural complexity hinders both transparency and participation by partners and even by the public. And the Beyond 2025 program has focused on something called, or a concept called, leaning into a network of networks model of organization. So kind of an organizational model that enables top government officials to work down through localities, people with their feet, with boots on the ground and trying new things and working in the sandboxes, as Jill puts it. So we wanted to just kind of take a little opportunity to say, yay, network of networks model, and thank you, Beyond 2025 people, for thinking innovatively in that regard.
Great. So Larry, returning to your mention of kind of, this is the moment to kind of put these ideas on the table. Looking at the second discussion question, what are some transformational ideas, the vanguard ideas that really stood out to you as part of this conversation that we've had with Beyond 2025?
Thanks, Anna. So first of all, I just wanted to again reintroduce myself. I am the current chair of the Bay Program Scientific and Technical Advisory Committee, or STAC. But I've been a professor at the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science for a long time, and I spent my entire career studying the Chesapeake Bay. You know, I love this place. And I've also participated in the Bay Program Modeling Work Group for many years, and this is my second time serving on staff. So I really care about what happens here. The two sources that I'm going to be working from today, or speaking from today, are the STAC report that was already mentioned, called the Comprehensive Evaluation System Response, or CESAR. And of course, what we've been discussing so far at the Beyond 2025 Steering Committee. So CESAR was developed independently by STAC between 2019 and 2023 to look at what has worked to date and how we can continue to improve water quality and living resources in the Bay and its watershed. The major findings in CESAR are that non-point sources, both agricultural and urban, are the primary remaining sources of pollutant loads in the Chesapeake watershed. But they're not on track to meet the TMDL anytime soon. You know, there's a number of reasons for this. One of them are that there's a shortage, there are shortfalls in best management practice implementation in the watershed, which are, these are voluntary. Some of the BMPs are not performing in the long run as well as they could be. And we know about many natural time lags between implementation and pollutant load response. But given the historical trajectory of how quickly we're achieving the water quality criteria, we're not going to get there anytime soon for all of meeting all the criteria. It could take up to 100 years at the present rate of change. So something has to change. We think with additional management actions that we can realize significant improvements in living resources, which was the original reason for the Bay program, without completely achieving all the water quality standards across all of the habitats. In particular, we think that shifting the focus of the Bay program towards the shallows, which are so important for many, many, many living resources, and not just the shallows in the Bay, but the shallows in the watershed as well. That a shift in emphasis may yield better results for living resources that we all care about so much. And finally, we think that we really have to stick to this idea of flexible, high-level adaptive management based on continued learning about system responses. So we can continue to, we're dealing with some very unpredictable near-term future changes through climate change and continuing population growth and land use change. We need to be able to adapt as we go along to really achieve what we want to. So what are the big ideas, the big transformational ideas that I have, and I have to say these are mine. I hope I share them with other folks too. Is that we don't really need to completely redo the Chesapeake Bay Agreement. We can update the agreement by modifying some parts of it. We can reprioritize the goals and outcomes to focus on living resources. We can rebalance the resources that are expended on different parts of the program to accelerate overall system response. And we can do this without leaving anything or anyone behind. But we have to consider a rebalancing and perhaps a reprioritization. We think there are better ways to reduce non-point source pollutant loads in the watershed. These include a number of ideas targeting high load areas. Now that we have finer spatial resolution in the models and in the data, that should be possible. We can use what are called pay for performance incentives, where you don't just pay farmers, for example, to put in a BMP. You pay them if they follow up and show that it's actually worked. You pay them more. We can address nutrient mass imbalances where, for example, you have huge amounts of animal feed brought in from outside of our watershed. And where does it go? Where do those nutrients and pollutants go? They go into the watershed. They go into the waters in the bay. We can engage our local communities more. We can allow our communities, as Jill said, to experiment with their ideas to improve implementation, this sandboxing idea. We don't have to limit what we ask them to do to just reducing loading. We can also ask them to improve local habitat quality, to go after their own local resources, their living resources, and to improve local access to the water as well. There's other things we can go after. And finally, we think that we can use this tiered TMDL approach, which is to say we can focus on the TMDL objectives that have the biggest payoff soon, and perhaps relax the timetable for some of those that are going to be much harder to achieve. And that slight reallocation of resources may be sufficient to allow us to address some of these other priorities without a huge infusion of permanent money. What we think basically is that achieving the entire TMDL for every segment in the Chesapeake Bay doesn't have to be the primary objective of the Bay program. It has to remain an objective, but there are many other good things to work on.
Thanks, Larry. Jill or Charles, anything you want to add on to that idea or highlight?
Sure, I'll just briefly note, you know, I definitely had an aha moment about the fact that there are 92 TMDLs and not just one. It was a great opportunity to work alongside folks from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Joe Wood, Virginia Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Lee McDonald with EPA, and many other very brilliant minds with our Clean Water Small Group as part of the Beyond 2025 steering committee. And I think one of the transformational ideas that will take some work, and especially as it relates to policy setting, programmatic changes, and or just overall culture shifts, is the opportunity and the idea to look at other areas within the Bay and not just solely focusing on that deep channel, deep water segment, that we can look at opportunities that lead us to that place, but not necessarily solely focus on that one very significant objective. And so I think that will also lead to a greater amount of incremental success across the watershed and across the Bay itself. And really it comes down to motivating, ensuring people have the momentum and the motivation to continue to do good work in their backyards.
Then Charles, if you want to, anything you want to add there, and then just take us through to that third discussion question of what role do you see for the residents of the watershed and the region in this next chapter?
Okay, let me try. In terms of transformational ideas, we're motivated. We're motivated and impressed with the Beyond 2025 emphasis upon people as kind of a primary organizational, primary study, primary component of how to think about the Bay program moving forward. And so at a 30,000-foot level, our vanguard idea is people. But if I can try to take us on a controlled descent from 30,000 feet down to the grass, I guess grass tops, grass roots would not be smart, the grass tops level. Let me focus on something. The Bay program necessarily relies heavily on the talents, on the energy, experience, and advice, and frankly, on the grace of volunteers. But what we're learning and starting to appreciate more and more all the time is that job demands and things like economic security, social stigmas can make volunteerism a matter of privilege. It's problematic sometimes to be a volunteer. Simply put, a lot of people within the Bay program can't afford to volunteer, yet we need and we ask for their services and perspectives. So kind of the question I think that answers itself is why do we presume that valued services should be provided for free? So my little vanguard idea is that we shouldn't do that, and that we should continue to work with agencies within the partnership to act to fund stipend programs that enable volunteerism by all parties that want to help us within the program. So enabling volunteerism through things like stipends is a little point that I'd like to put forward as transformational and at the vanguard.
Thanks, Charles.
And I'm launching us right into the next one.
Yes.
Okay. Real quickly, the Stakeholders Advisory Committee is one of 3 advisory bodies that's built into the first Bay Agreement. Our committee is one of the few non-governmental voices within the formal structure of the Bay program. Our membership includes 28 volunteers, 12 of which are appointed by watershed state governors, 4 by the mayor of DC, and 9 at large. I was appointed about 6 years ago by the DC Mayor Muriel Bowser. And it's a group that's characterized by a diversity of experiential background, by professional and by a diversity in professional and employment focus, and by social and cultural and ethnic origin and outlook. And I do need to add that we have vacancies for positions in Delaware and New York. So anybody out there in the 168 people watching right now and interested in this, please go to chesapeakebay.net and let us know. But as I move to the third question, the role we see for residents of the Bay watershed and the region in the next chapter of Bay restoration. Maybe if I can launch from the good work that Larry and the technical committee have done. The Caesar report focused primarily, or included a strong focus on the impossibility or the near impossibility of restoration of the Bay from an ecological perspective. I want to talk about another important dimension of the idea of restoration. I want to go back to this notion of people. And I want to suggest that from a people perspective, from a social and cultural perspective, we don't want to restore past conditions. We don't want redlined communities within the Bay watershed. We can't tolerate discriminatory access to Bay resources. We don't want BIPOC voices excluded from Bay-related deliberation and decision-making. Instead, we want, and we see this unfolding through the Beyond 2025 process, we want to engage people of a more diverse spectrum and people across a more diverse spectrum more deeply in the deliberative process and the decision-making processes that guide the Bay program. We think based on that the revised Bay Agreement and the Bay program structure need to center on and operationalize diversity, equity, and inclusiveness. And I have two specific things or ideas I want to share with people. First, we think it's important that Bay program grant programs associated with the Chesapeake Bay program be seriously reconsidered, reassessed, and rebuilt to enhance realistic access for individuals and community level groups within the Bay watershed. There's just too many small community level groups that are realistically barred from grant monies to incorporate best practices and other programs to improve the Bay. So I have three very specific recommendations in that regard. First, we recommend a serious review of federal laws and policies that make it difficult for small and community level groups to attain and administer grant funding. Secondly, and this follows down from the first, we would recommend a serious review of OMB guidance that influences grant officials at EPA and the Park Service and NOAA and at NIFWIF and the Bay Trust and other partner agencies that interpret and implement CFR and federal policies. And then finally, a serious review of agency level grant and contract officer interpretations and policies in terms of how Bay program grants are managed. And we acknowledge and we acknowledge that this is happening. Colleagues at EPA and NOAA and other agencies are changing review requirements, changing RFP requirements, initiating funding and assistance programs. We applaud this. It's great. But, and this leads to my second and last recommendation, we think these improvements that are coming through the agencies right now should be subject to critique and hands-on review by the communities whom they're intended to benefit. So innovations and investments in improved grant access and administration need to be subject to real-time evaluation or action-directed social science learning techniques that involve and hopefully empower the targeted communities. So a couple little ideas with what we think would be big implications for improving the way the program operates now and moving forward.
Thanks, Charles. So I promised that we would at least take one question. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric to see if there's a question from the chat that he wants to throw at our panelists before we close out.
Yes, and thank you all so much for your input and your responses to those questions. We have, well, one point that I want to highlight from the chat. Alexandra says, Chuck, to your point about the stipend concept, she said, I think the stipend concept is huge for equity, and others concur. So great point. And a question from Deanna and Larry, I think this might be your wheelhouse. What impacts, good or bad, did hurricanes/tropical storms have on the restoration efforts? From those experiences, what changes were made and incorporated into the efforts going forward? Any of you can take that, but Larry, it seems appropriate maybe for you.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. This is they have big events have a huge impact. The biggest that we know about, of course, is Tropical Storm Agnes in 1972. Somebody needs to mute. Thank you. So, and the biggest problem with it was a huge storm, but it happened at the very beginning of the growing season. And its biggest impact actually was the amount of fresh water. You realize that it was like below 10 parts per thousand of salt all the way down to the mouth of the bay for an extended period of time. Those kind of major storms can have a huge lasting impact on the estuary, and they're going to be, all of our best projections at this point is that they're going to be more frequent and more intense. Right? We think that hurricane intensification is going to happen, and that hurricane movement is going to slow down once they hit land. And that's what's happened, for example, in Houston recently with these enormous flooding events that they get. So we need to aim for adaptation and resilience as much as we do for nose to the grindstone, keep working slowly. We need to plan for resilience in a very big way with regard to those major events.
Thank you for that answer, Larry. And we have one more question. We want to make sure we have time for closing remarks here, but if you can answer this question in 60 seconds or less. Oyster aquaculture is in many cases a commercial venture, though many residents have started growing oysters for personal consumption. Does the panel see this as an additional way for residents to help in the bay's restoration? If so, are there programs to encourage oyster aquaculture in waterfront communities? If that maybe requires.
No, well, so I can, this, I've worked on a couple of proposals. We haven't got funded yet, but we're still working on them about this topic. And, not in my backyard is a big deal still. A lot of these waterfront properties in the bay are very valuable. And oyster aquaculture, to me personally, I think of it as being a really cool thing that's happening. I would love to be able to look out on my piece of bay and see watermen out there working on aquaculture, but a lot of people don't, and that's their prerogative. But we need to demonstrate that there are other serious advantages for oyster aquaculture to make it apparent, and maybe to make it apparent that there can be a benefit that's more than just growing oysters.
And I'll just add, there are partners not on our panel right now who are taking part in aquaculture programs with residents. So that answer is out there, but maybe just not reflected here.
Possibly.
Thank you, Larry, and thank you, Anna. In our last few seconds, I'm going to turn it over to Martha for closing remarks.
So yeah, just quick closing remarks to thank our panelists and the audience as well, to stick with this, to listen to this, to the discussion, for your interest and the questions that we got to see and some of those that we got to answer. I think when Dr. Larry Sanford said, I really care about what happens here, I think he speaks for all of us, and I hope he speaks for all of us. And I truly hope that everyone goes away from this session as excited and as enthusiastic as we are about forming the future of the Chesapeake Bay Program. Thank you all.
Thank you so much again today to all of our speakers and panelists for joining us. We invite all of you who are still with us. Thank you all as participants for sticking with us. We invite you to please complete the survey on the screen. You can either click the link that will be in the chat or scan the QR code with your phone. We'd love to hear about your feedback about all of the sessions you heard today, about things you'd like to hear about in the future, and get some comments. So please take a moment to do that. And while you do that, I will start playing a thank you video. This will conclude our entire meeting for today. No more Zoom rooms to jump into. And we really appreciate your time and your participation.
Hey, everybody. I want to thank you for stepping up and stepping into the Mid-Atlantic Summit this year. Whether it's your first time or whether you've been here before, we're glad that you participated and listened and learned and feel empowered. So whether you're a community member, an environmental justice crusader, an academic, a scientist, a student leader, a resident who just showed up to listen and find out how they can help, we just want to thank you for whatever you're doing in your leadership role, whether it's in your business or in your university or even in your household. It matters. I also want to thank all the speakers and moderators who shared their experiences and wisdom today. I want to thank Tom Perez from the White House, my boss, EPA Deputy Administrator Janet McCabe, our state secretaries. We had tremendous participation and we talk all the time. So those of you in the state should know that your principals are having a lot of conversations with us here at EPA on a consistent basis. I want to thank our meteorologists. We don't usually have meteorologists, but they have an incredible perspective to have. Every day they're watching the weather and the changing weather and its impacts on local communities, and their personalities that everybody knows and listens to. So we're thrilled to have their participation. Also our other federal agency partners. There is a team here at the federal level that is working together. We all have a different piece, whether it's the Army Corps of Engineers or NOAA or the Forest Service. We're all working in the environment together, and I want to thank all of them, our federal partners who showed up today. Also want to thank some other newer voices to conferences like this. Dar Williams and Russell Armstrong, tremendous cultural perspective, reaching people that we might not be able to reach otherwise, and feeling connected and empowered to audiences who need to feel connected. So I want to thank them as well. And also all the folks behind the scenes. For months, we've been planning this with many of our state partners and state associations, local leaders. So just thank you for whatever you did behind the scenes. And it's really about three things for me. It's about engaging, making sure that we're reaching out and listening, whether it's internal, external, because we're all on team environment together. And that's important, that we're connected. It's no us against them. It's only us. To align, to make sure that we're bringing our specific competencies or experiences or perspectives or accountability to the table. We need everybody to work on one team together. And then finally, to deliver, to get things done, to make sure that we're making a meaningful impact in the places that need it. And that's our focus here in the Biden-Harris administration, that we're investing in America and in every single corner. And in the 2+ years that I've been in this role, me and my team have met with many of you in every single corner of this region, from the southern coalfields of West Virginia, McDowell County, to Erie, Pennsylvania, in the upper northwest corner, to Scranton and Wilkes-Barre, in those historic communities in the northeast, and all the way down to Hampton Roads in the southeast, and hundreds of places in between. So we're showing up across sectors, across cities, urban and rural, and making sure that we're doing everything that we can to give a boost to the folks on the ground. And this EPA is a little bit different than maybe EPAs in the past, or the stereotypes of us. We are working closely with sectors that we haven't engaged so much before. We have been working closely with the agriculture community, with farms. We're reaching out to the private sector across the board, including factories. We're showing up to old cities. We're showing up to farmlands. Regardless of what kind of production farms are doing, we're engaging with them closely as well. We know that there's historic waterways that we all impact. There's three major ones in our region, and we've showed up to all of them. We're also showing up to the fence line communities, the places that border the polluters. And we're also showing up to beautiful national parks like the New River Gorge, our newest national park in West Virginia. And it's important that we do that because everybody's shares, a commitment to our environment, and we need to work together. Also, we're showing up in, newer places that are sprouting up from old brownfields, and also neighborhoods that were once racially and economically segregated from redlining, communities that have been on the margins, but not anymore. And all these places, we love to get out. We love to see what folks in the community see and live with every single day. So we've been walking the streets, we've been wading in the waters, we've been paddling, and we've seen and heard, and in some cases smelled, things that need our attention. So we're committed and we're engaged. And we still got a lot of work to do. Don't want to understate that in any way, shape, or form. But the good news is that we're working together, more than ever before, across all these sectors, across, all these different corners of our region, and again, no us against them. It's only us. And that's how we're doing it, because we talk about these historic investments and, all this level of funding that's never been available before, and that's great and that's important. But our measure of success is going to be whether we get these resources to the right people in the right places with the right projects, to make a difference, the places that need it the most. And that's where so many of you come in. And that's the alignment piece, alignment, making sure we're giving a boost to folks on the ground who are doing great work, who know what the solutions are, and that we're getting the resources in their hands, in your hands. And the delivery is important, to make sure that this isn't talk, this is walk. That at the end of the day, the wastewater treatment plants or the drinking water systems are upgraded and healthy, that kids are riding in more and more electric school buses. And that the bus drivers have a less stressful experience and one of the toughest jobs in our region. That's a big deal, that matters. Community solar, transitioning to more renewable energy, that we're investing in the capacity of tribes and community organizations because they're doing the work on the ground. We're supporting our teachers and our schools and our students because they're the future. And that we're working to make progress, in all of our historic waterways, the Delaware, the Ohio River watershed, and the Chesapeake Bay in between, that we're paying attention to all of them because folks see and hear and live in those watersheds every single day, and they deserve the highest quality of life and the cleanest water possible. But moving forward, we are going to continue to prioritize our commitment to these communities that have been historically on the margin. Includes our tribes, in particular, our resilient First Nations that have had a historic connection to our region. Many of our waterways and some of our states even bear the names of these First Nations. And it's our commitment in this administration that we empower and help reconnect tribes to these historic lands, again, that often, bear their names, and that we also listen and learn from them, because they have incredible wisdom, incredible experience, and so much of our nation owes an incredible debt to them. So we are showing up and we're listening. And these communities that bear more than their fair share of stressors, with data and just with years and years of institutional knowledge and working with all sorts of activists and with the government, we know where many of these places are. We've identified 37 priority engagement communities, places that have environmental justice concerns. And they're not all urban, there's certainly urban stressors, but we know that rural communities are often forgotten, and we're engaging and showing up there and investing and walking in those communities and helping empower them for the solutions that they need. A lot of these environmental justice challenges, urban, rural, and everywhere in between, are decades and in some cases centuries in the making. They're complex, they're social, cultural, economic, as well as environmental, and we have to work together across many different disciplines, listen to many voices to help untie these stubborn knots that have been tied for too long. But, if anything is taken away from today, it's that EPA in our role, and we do have a role, but we can't do this alone. We need you. We need each and every one of you in the organizations and institutions in the neighborhoods that you represent. We have to build these partnerships, across sectors. Historical adversaries have to come together because we have so much to do. It's the only way that we're going to solve these stubborn problems and help hand a cleaner and healthier environment to the next generation. So if you're here today, I think you share that belief that change is possible, that we can get things done. It's not an option, as failure is not an option. We have got to work together. And this includes the tough stuff. Climate change can feel very overwhelming, no question. These communities that have been stuck in cycles of environmental justice, it can be disheartening and overwhelming, but change is possible when we work together. Change is possible when we're intentional. Change is possible when we care. And I am committed to working together and undoing the false narrative that we're too divided, that rural can't work with urban, or that farmer can't work with environmentalist, or that working class folks can't work with academics. I do not believe that. I believe that we're one team and we have to, and we will work together. So going forward, let's commit to that, to engage, across, all sectors and all different types of folks and communities to protect this incredible resource that we've inherited, to align that we're going to work together, that we're going to bring all of our skills and competencies together and perspectives to figure things out, and that we're going to deliver, that we're going to get things done, and then we're going to keep it moving. So if you couldn't tune in to everything today and there was a lot, or if you had to miss something or had to step away, or if you want to go back to something, no worries. We recorded each session. They'll all be available online in a couple of weeks, and we'll send a notice out to let you know about that. So please go back if you're interested in something, or if you want to share something with a colleague or a friend, don't hesitate. And also don't hesitate to stay in touch with us. We, as you can tell, are highly engaged and highly committed to our common success. So don't be shy. Follow us on social media, and we have a lot of good stuff on social media. We're going to send you a survey as well to let us know what you thought about the summit. If you think there's anything we're missing or anything that we should do again, we want to know. But please don't be shy. We're on your team. So thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you in the upcoming months.
Thank you all very much. That concludes today's meeting. Please fill out the survey, and we will see you next year.